Welcome to Author Talks. I'm WCBS reporter Peter Haskell. Our guest today, Father Brian Jordan. Father Brian has written a book entitled The Ground Zero Cross. Father, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Peter, for inviting me.
Let's start from the beginning. What is the Ground Zero Cross?
Back on September 23rd, 2001, in the aftermath of the terrible tragedy of September 11, 2001, after I was given communion to a number of construction workers, police officers, firefighters, I was invited by a union construction worker to follow him to World Trade Center 6, and he asked me to look inside, and I was sort of curious why, and I looked inside. I found what I interpret and believe to be a sign from God. It was a cross-like beam that fell within the ruins of World Trade Center 6. It was on a 20-degree angle to the right, and on the left side was a piece of insulation which resembled that of the Shroud of Turin. But it was so prominent the way it was, I was just overwhelmed with emotion, with joy, and complete surprise on this matter. And I said, wow, this God never abandoned us. So I understood what Frank Saleccia, the workers, meant, and within minutes, two firefighters entered the area. We had eye contact with each other. They knelt down in prayer as I did, and they realized what it was as well. We interpret this to be a cross, a sign from God, that God never abandoned us at ground zero.
The cross is now in the 9/11 Museum. There was a long, torturous path to get that. We'll talk about that. But you know what struck me? You read about God's house, and that's the area where the cross was found. And the first thought is, how does God allow this to happen on 9/11? I'm curious how frequently you heard that question, and how do you answer that?
Well, for the first 2 weeks from September 11th towards the end of September, I do not exaggerate. At least 500 occasions, people ask me, why did God allow this to happen? And my answer to all of them is the same answer we give tonight. God never intended this to happen. This was the abuse of free will by 19 misguided, tormented men. They abused the Quran, they abused the great religion of Islam, and they abused their free will to take down those two planes which entered into the towers. And I do not fault God for this. God gives us free will, and it's up for humanity of free will. But God didn't abandon us. He gave us that sign, and God gave us the strong resolve for our nation to unite with one another to help each other out.
So this cross is found at what was 6 World Trade. What role did that play?
An immense role that no one even planned or occurred. As soon as I found the cross on the next day, September 24th, I called First Deputy Mayor Joseph Loder, who's presently the president of the MTA, and he was really the go-to guy in the Giuliani administration. I told him about the cross. He instructed me to deal with the leaders of their representing the mayor in the office, Ken Holden of the Department of DDC, and we planned for October 4th, 2001, when about 10 days later, to have an official blessing of the Ground Zero Cross. The reason why we chose October 4th is October 4th is the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, the founder of my order. He's also the patron saint of ecology. This is sacred ground where nearly 3,000 people died, and we're going to bless the cross on that sacred ground.
Tell us about that Mass and the blessing.
The blessing was, we had a representative from the New York City police officers, the Port Authority, FDNY, construction workers, also with Frank Saleccia, the union construction worker who found the cross, and with the assistance of NYPD and the union construction workers, operating engineers, whatever. We have over 400 people. We blessed the cross in 4 directions, from the north, the south, the east, and the west. See that God's directions of love is with us there on that sacred ground. And at the end, I yelled out, God bless America, and the operating engineers sounded the horns from all the trucks, from all the other matters we had, and we all yelled out, God bless America. It was a wonderful, cathartic day.
You describe that in the book as very emotionally cathartic. What was it about it?
We were asking ourselves, we're trying to find meaning and purpose since that time, from September 11th to October 4th. Why did this happen? And I keep on telling, I don't believe God does not destroy, but what God creates. This was a man-made, diabolical attack, and but we of humanity, it's incumbent upon us to remove this evil force and let the goodness of God's love be there. So catharsis is that even though we've seen evil at its worst, we saw goodness at its best, and we saw goodness triumph over evil on the day of the blessing, October 4th, 2001.
One of the things you mentioned in the book about this blessing was the bagpipes. What was that all about?
The bagpipers, which for the New York City Police Department, the FDNY, Port Authority, police, they played at many funerals for many of their fallen colleagues, and that was for the matter of, before the death, saying "Going Home" is a favorite bagpipe song. And for us, we were in reverse. We were coming home. We were retaking ground zero. It might have been taken away for those 19 men, but all the people of God who were there that day and afterwards for the next 10 months, we came home to take back what was rightfully ours and to sanctify this sacred ground.
I want to take a detour. When you first went to ground zero, you read about going to St. Francis and grabbing holy water and brass knuckles. What was that about?
Well, when I first discovered about the attack, I thought I probably needed down there. So I went into my room and got a vial of holy water. Then I remembered that there might be some tensions down there. I'm not sure any other surprise attacks. So I went into my locker and got out a gift that a Puerto Rican family gave it to me in the South Bronx for my 30th birthday. It was a pair of brass knuckles, because violence is not a last resort of the South Bronx at the time. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, so I was going to bless the people of God with the holy water, and any of the attackers who were coming back, I was going to, give them a little retaliation with the brass knuckles.
And if you think about it now, in those first days and weeks, there was an uncertainty of what might have happened next.
We weren't sure if they were going to follow through with another attack. We heard about a poison gas attack. We heard some other toxin going on, a matter of a dirty bomb. There was a lot of stuff going on in the imagination, and I'm trying to ask people, calm down. I believe this is it. I don't think we're going to suffer anymore. And let's take control of our mind and our senses. And one thing I always told the people a lot is, be kind with your mind. Be smart with your heart, and console your soul. Be kind with your mind, be smart with your heart, console your soul, and let God help us and heal us.
You have the blessing at the Ground Zero Cross. How frequently did you have Mass, and what kind of attendance did you have there?
We began the Mass officially on September 30th, and we got permission. I was the only one allowed to have a religious service on site to the mayor's office and to the Port Authority. And 10:30 we chose because that was around the time when the second tower went down, exactly 10:28. We started with about 25 people, and up to the last Mass was over 400 people. And probably the most significant Mass, they're all significant, but also was the Mother's Day Mass, is when all the mothers who lost their children or their grandchildren or their husbands or whatever, at the Our Father, at the Kiss of Peace, a bunch of members of the Special Forces, the Green Berets, were about to be deployed to go to Afghanistan, came upon us. And I asked them, I says, soldiers, if you wonder what you're fighting for, look in the eyes of these mothers who lost their children, their husbands, their grandchildren. And mothers, if you want to give blessings, and I give you blessings upon these brave soldiers who are about to fight for our freedom of Afghanistan. It was the longest kiss of peace of any Mass I've ever seen in all my life, and it was the most emotionally charged and deeply satisfying to see the love. People, complete strangers, embracing and kissing each other. I'll never forget that as long as I live.
And just describe that interaction. You've got these soldiers, and you have these mothers and grandmothers and fathers and daughters and sons. What was that like?
Well, it was Mother's Day, and Mother's Day is supposed to be a happy occasion, and it was a very somber occasion at the beginning because of the loss of life. The people who expect to be home to celebrate Mother's Day with them were no longer alive. And I don't want to make it just a sad somber occasion, although it went out that way. But this is where I think God had something handed it. I think He sent those special forces because they want to know what they were fighting for. And they got that inspiration from those mothers, daughters, fathers you mentioned. And these mothers needed some purposes that these men who were around the same age of their sons or their grandsons going out there. And so this more like these are the surrogate sons, the surrogate grandsons who are going off to war, and they give them support and love as they did to the ones who fell in 9/11.
You touched upon it, but it seems like the whole theme or the whole point was this symbol had meaning to so many people. What was it about the symbol? What did they look for? What did they derive from it?
Well, as you know, Peter, that this tragedy wasn't just an American tragedy. There were 80 other nations who lost loved ones, going from Australia, from Russia, Great Britain, Mexico, Nigeria, Kenya, Brazil. And people from the metropolitan area and people around the country began to find consolation and comfort for the presence of this cross. They realized there's something holy. This was sanctified ground. It wasn't just a crime scene. There was something holy about that cross that gave meaning and purpose. And also gave purpose for the recovery workers, for the police officers, firefighters, and union construction workers who were working there, and the Salvation Army, who were great volunteers. They found meaning and purpose. You heard from Viktor Frankl had, in search of meaning, what happened because in regards to the Holocaust. There were certain physical sites they had that give meaning and purpose. And this particular Ground Zero Cross gave meaning and purpose and consolation for people, not in our country, but around the world.
And what I thought was interesting is you described the fact that this was not just for Catholics and Christians.
This was not Catholic only Mass. We had Protestants, we had Jewish people, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs at the Mass. We even had atheists who attended the Mass. And I was going to ask them, the Catholic, if I distributed communion, whether they believed in the Catholic Church was immaterial. This was a man of bonding with people, showing a sense of community and understanding and purpose. So many religious faith traditions were present for the Masses, and many multiple religious traditions found purpose. They understood. If we found a Star of David on site, we would have had it up there. We found a crescent, we would have had it up there. But we found it interpreted to be a cross. And for me, it was America's cross, and not just for any particular religious tradition.
In 2006, October 5th, it gets moved to St. Peter's Church, which is down the block. Why the move, and what was that ceremony like?
Well, originally, the Port Authority, who was in charge of the site, they had a practice to remove all precious items or artifacts into a hangar in JFK Airport. And the union construction workers, we found out about this. There was a room that the cross might be moved there. And through Ed Malloy, who was the leader of the building trades, where the symbol right here, we met with the Port Authority, and we simply told them, if you try to move the cross off site, we will shut down the site. We will shut down, walk off the site, and there will be no progress made on the site. The Port Authority convened among themselves. They decided to have a compromise that will move the cross from the site to exactly a block away on the side of St. Peter's Church. And St. Peter's Church is historic in itself. It was the first house of worship that responded, that being a temporary morgue where we put the bodies of Father Michael Judge, Pete Gansey, Bill Feehan, and other those who had died there. We're so grateful for St. Peter's Church for their wonderful work from day one, and for showing hospitality, for having the cross be on the side of the church for over 5 years.
Was that a good spot? I know you wanted it to stay there.
I thought it was a wonderful spot. I thought people were praying there. This is the oldest Catholic church in the Archdiocese of New York. It was there visible. People could see it from all walks of life. I thought it was the perfect place to be, but I guess it wasn't meant to be for a variety of reasons, but so be.
It's in the 9/11 museum now. What is your sense, what you're feeling about where it is and how it represents what you want it to represent?
I can't say enough goodness about the executive director, Alice Greenwald. Alice Greenwald was the founder of the United States Holocaust Museum down in Washington, D.C. She has amazing sensitivity, competency, and vision. She heard me out about my concerns about the cross, and so I am very grateful for Alice Greenwald for her wonderful competency, her leadership, and sense of community regards this cross.
I know one of the reasons you said you wanted to write the book was to pay tribute to those who advocated for it. Tell us about some of those people.
The book is really developed into three groups, and the first and foremost is the union construction workers, who are 80% of the workforce down there. And I don't think they get enough recognition of what they've done down there. In the recovery period, they cleaned up the site and demolition with under budget and under time. And Edward J. Malloy is the microcosm of that person for the union construction workers. The second group is the New York City Police Department, the Fire Department of New York, Office of Emergency Management, and the Port Authority of Police, who did wonderful work down there. And the microcosm of them is my good friend Richard Shearer, who is of the Jewish faith, but he was one of the biggest supporters of the cross down there. And both he and Ed died in the same year in 2012, when the cross was yet to be was officially in the museum, but they fought for it. And no matter, last but not least, with a bunch of family members of the victims who really wanted the cross to stay on site, and the microcosm for that person was Jane Policino, who collected 5,000 signatures. So it's dedicated to these wonderful three groups of people.
If someone is interested in the book, The Ground Zero Cross, how can they get it?
They could go on to Amazon or .com, but I ask that any nonprofit group or any house of worship, you want to get multiple books, please contact me at the following email address: groundzerocross@gmail.com. Repeat, groundzerocross@gmail.com. And we'll arrange not only for a discount, but the distribution of books that you require.
Father Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
Father Brian Jordan, the author of The Ground Zero Cross. I'm Peter Haskell. Thanks for coming in, and thanks for joining us.